Thank you very much, Your Excellency Maria. Indeed, even though in quite a short time, you covered quite a comprehensive discussions on what is generally being touched on the new normal. You've touched about matters related to work, related to the implementation of democracy, the protection of human rights, which is certainly a very important topic. Um, Now I think I will open up. I will look at several of the questions which have already been shared by our attendees. I will start with the first question on the list by Andrew Hu. Um, in particular on the relations between Malaysia and ASEAN with the European Union. Perhaps I will start with maybe a more general question before I will focus on the question by Andrew. In general, how much is the relation between Malaysia and the European Union affected under this COVID situation now?
Well, I think that I cannot say that the relation is affected because we have certainly had, continue all our contacts with the authorities. They have been very helpful to help us in this time and bring all the Europeans tourists stranded in Malaysia that had to go back home, like a lot of Malaysia who were in Europe wanted to come back home. So we have been working very closely with Foreign Affairs and Immigration, Ministry of Health, to try to help those nationals going home. A big consular coordination effort from all the EU embassies here in Malaysia and my embassy. But also we have been working with business, with MITI, with other ministers to try to help, that Malaysia still becomes a supply chain hub role they have, so that this was not interrupted. Everyone was looking for personal protection equipment. Malaysia does provide some of those equipment, so it was very important that we reach them and that they will be able to maintain those supply and production of this equipment for Malaysian, but also for catering for the world. And this is important because that hints in the reputation of how Malaysia can be part of the supply chain, which is, they maintain it, and I think it has worked a lot, but that required a lot of discussions, consultations, sharing talks. So this has been very active, and at the same time, we were very concerned of what was happening in Europe. Even the situation was even worse than here in Asia. So we have been, working very closely with our staff. The important is the health, the situation of our team, our members. Like I imagine yours was our first priority: protect them, see if they needed something at home, if the teleworking way was there. But the contacts with Malaysia are there. We, of course, we are all tackling in a pandemic. We are all tackling a crisis, which is not a crisis of one country. It's a crisis all over the world. So we all have the crisis. So we need to work together. There has been a lot of changes in research, in health. We have put together scientists that were in Italy coping with the COVID when Lombardy and Italy were really very hard struck, and these people talked to the Malaysia health authorities to try to exchange and share how they had tackled their situation at the beginning. So scientific cooperation needs to be enhanced, and we have been working, with YB Kairi and others to try to see how we can bring Malaysia into all the efforts that are being done at ASEAN Europe level on treatment of COVID and vaccines research. So we have been very busy. These are just examples that what we have been doing, working with our business, our people, and interacting with Malaysia people, trying to see where our friends are, where, if they were well, if they needed, so our office has never been closed, and our contacts and our relations has been gone forward.
So I'll go back straight to the question by Andrew. What would be, or are there any particular lessons that Malaysia or ASEAN countries can or should learn from the way the European Union member states have dealt or are currently dealing with the pandemic?
Well, Andrew, I think I have, as I said at the beginning, I was trying to answer you that question throughout the talk, but mainly, we have seen a closer cooperation and need between ASEAN countries. This has to be used as an excuse to perhaps furthermore into the need of more closer ASEAN cooperation. In Europe at the beginning, we were just suddenly all in disarray, and then we realized, it is together where we can find solutions and that complement what the national governments are doing. And I think that is the main lesson, and cooperation and doing things together. But I have also in different, speaking about opportunities, we will, certainly Malaysia will also have more green, more digital in their recovery plans. It's fundamental if they do it like we are doing. And I hope also that, values and principles and human rights commitments are put also at the center of whatever recovery plan.
I'll continue to follow up with another question by Andrew, mainly on situation regarding xenophobia. So I will just refer to Andrew's question. We know that in the past, the influx of immigrants and refugees in the European Union has not been welcome. In this time of COVID-19, has there been an explosion of xenophobia in the European Union, like we have seen here also in Malaysia quite recently? And Andrew's question continues, what has been done to counter this xenophobia? And I think that would be the focus for this question.
I mean, I mentioned before in my intervention, I said this pandemic cannot be an excuse to resort to a xenophobia or hate speech, and that's something that our European leaders have continuously said and mentioned. And for us, it was very important. We cannot. It's not time to blame anyone. This is very, very dramatic. It's done. And we have been working also in this campaign of disinformation, because this also goes into this campaign of fake news, blaming one, blaming the other. So we have been trying to work also with companies, with online platforms to try to tackle all this information that is happening. I mean, I know the case here in Malaysia, there has been a lot of attacks online against Rohingyas and others. So this is, you need to work with online platforms to try to cut this information. This is not good for anyone. And these communities are very vulnerable, and it's not time to blame anyone, it's time to help.
I'll look into the next question by Adriana Abu. So Adriana's question, do you think Malaysia has the willpower, namely political will, to create a new future based on respect to human rights, environment, food security for all citizens, not just the rich and the powerful? For example, along the lines that France has adopted in introducing cycling as a new transport of choice as a social distancing measure. So looking into some of your suggestions that Your Excellency, you have pointed out earlier, whether do you find that Malaysia would have the political will to move forward, including on important matters related to the protection of human rights and the protection of democracy during this post-COVID-19 or in the new normal?
Well, I think all the elements are there for this to happen. I have seen in my 4 years here a society which is much more demanding on human rights, demanding on environment, and it's coming bottom up. So the pressure needs to be there, we saw much more people now cycling. We have the cycling blue lots that are paths that they were put there in, I think it was January 2018, if my mind was not. I think it was, January 2008, when you had the big urban forum here city-urban United Nations forum here. And these paths have not been used very much. They are full of mottos and cars parked. But now when we were in this COVID situation, I have seen a lot of people now with the bicycle. So it's there in the people. In Europe, it has also been a bottom-up approach. It's public awareness coming up and putting pressure to politicians. Why do you think there is such much conscience about environment and climate in Europe? It has come from the people. It comes from schools, from the generation of my children, even more than our generation. And this is coming. The younger Malaysians, the public in general, have realized also how pure the air is in Malaysia, during COVID, in many cities as well in the world. So they will be asking and they will be demanding much more there from the politicians. So it's for the politicians now to give. But certainly I think the elements are there, and I hope to see a better Malaysia that way.
Certainly, also just an additional response to the question by Adriana earlier, besides then the challenge of the COVID-19, the challenge of dealing with our own politics is also quite complicated in the case of Malaysia over the past months. Perhaps we would need a separate specific topic on that one later in the coming weeks. I'll go to the question next. As you touched about politics, we have a notable politician posing a question. Yang Berhormat Sa'ari Sungep, the Adun for Hulu Kelang in Selangor. So the question by YB Sa'ari is, in order to establish justice, which is the aim of democracy, cooperation between nations is consistent with democracy. The United Nations, the UN, promotes democracy, but in itself is not democratic. Veto ends the issue prevailing. Thus, cooperation based on a normal is not a freedom of choice. No freedom without true democracy, whose standards are normal based and were still new normal, and who defines the new. So I think within quite a short paragraph, YB Sa'ari has added a few points, including a question on the situation of global justice, and also the practice of the veto when it comes to the global superpowers, and also the question on who, globally speaking, would shape and would define the new normals when it comes to these matters of democracy within an international relations and multinational context. So perhaps you have some comments on those questions.
YB, this will also be for a whole discussions. Very, very thoughtful, deep questions that are there in the table. I mentioned before that we should use this opportunity perhaps to look at possibilities to make the UN nations better, not only in WTO, but also on the UN Security Council and in other organisms, World Bank, for example. So there is this is still there on the table. It has come much more on the surface, as you said, because the realities are different, and we are celebrating this year 75 anniversary of the United Nations. So certainly this is important to see. 75 years, the world has changed a lot. So perhaps we need new mechanisms, new norms, as you say. But the fundamental rights that are in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, those have been established by societies, by the nations, and I think these are the base of whatever normal, whatever. As I said, for me, there's not a new normal. It's a change into building better and trying to. We have already the elements. This is a universal declaration. It's for everyone in the planet, and all the countries in the planet have adhered to it. So it has to be, the basis for working our plans, our recovery plans to come out of this pandemic more stronger. And this will be for societies, for the people. I think we need, as I said, to put the people at the heart of what we are going to build and what we are going to construct. And cooperation. Malaysia alone cannot do it. ASEAN alone cannot do it. Europe alone cannot do it. Spain alone cannot do it. It has to be together. So, and in cooperation, there's always someone who gives, someone who will take, someone who gives also. So we all have to give and take. That's the way we build this new normal together, and in a way that it is, we build something good for everyone.
Thank you, Your Excellency. There's another question that was raised in our Facebook page in regards to the situations which is currently faced by refugee communities. In particular, we mentioned here is the Rohingya communities here in Malaysia, which I think the person who asked the question would like to ask maybe your further comments. So I just read through the questions here. As far as I heard, the person heard from some of his contacts or her contacts, the Rohingya refugees have been losing their jobs since the MCO implemented here in Malaysia, and now most of the Rohingya refugees who are bearing the UNHCR card are not being recalled to resume their jobs and by the employers, and perhaps there are some other treatments towards the Rohingya community. So the question, as a European ambassador, what is the strength and thoughts on this issue, on the treatment towards the Rohingya refugees in Malaysia?
Rohingya refugees here, I think, have been in the past year. There has been, a better acceptance in the sense of taking them more into account. Openly, the government has been supporting Rohingyas very much in Malaysia, and taking care of those who are here. And there are many also organizations who are working with them, and we have been also, approaching and doing things with them. Now, as I said, in the pandemic, they are much more vulnerable. Not only here in Malaysia, but all over the Asia region, in Bangladesh, in the camps. Of course, confinement with so many people, it's very difficult, and you have a very high risk of the virus to spread. And therefore, the desperation they have already in the camps, and the situation is even, increased in this situation. So we are, in very close contact with the UNHCR, which is working closely also with the government to try to give these people and this health assistance, food assistance, because most of them will have, lose their work, their jobs, the work. But there was an agreement, I think, with the government to try to let them out so that they could not, because of health reasons, not spread the virus. So you need to let them be able to accede to health institutions without penalizing them if they don't have the papers. With the rights that we have seen in the last weeks, there has been back the risk that these people will go back in hiding, and therefore will have the health consequences are even worse for all of us. So we need to be. It's time to help. It's time of Ramadan as well. It's time to share. It's time to bring everyone together for compassion, for help, and we need to help each other, and we need to help the vulnerable. And this is fundamental. Here, what we have been trying to do is with our projects, trying to help them, trying to redirect some of the activities of our project to help the most vulnerable, the refugees, the migrants, the women, as I mentioned, women migrants. It is important. While it's understandable, like we have done all in Europe, to close borders, to try to protect borders, because this is a way to protect all of us in the countries. We need to do it with precaution, not to leave people that are very vulnerable, outside the system, and therefore then the health consequences are also there.
I'll share one question which I had in mind since the start of not only of recent time, but also over the past several weeks, especially during the time where the European region is one of the main central areas of the threat in COVID-19. Before, I would say the US have been taking over as the main center. That the European Union is generally being seen as a very good model of integration between different countries and nations with open borders. It's easy to travel from one place to another. But it is at the same time during that peak period, which starts in Spain, which starts in Italy and then later moves to Spain and then France, Germany and other places. It also shows some challenges when having such open borders and open coordination between the different nations and the different countries. And I recall I was watching one of the news reports in which one of the key issues being raised by during the, I cannot recall which exact European conference of meeting, that is the issues on coordination with quite an open settings of different countries, when the coordination between the different nations and countries in Europe itself, especially in matters related to the management of public health, was not being seen as at the most best of practice at that time. So looking into these challenges of COVID-19 in Europe over the past several weeks, what you would say would be like the main key lessons that Europe could explain or teach about in terms of retaining a model of an open borders of different nations and countries, while at the same time addressing and being in control of a threatening situation as the situation of COVID-19 that we are facing now?
So that's a complicated question. It has many dimensions. I would start saying that because people don't know that, but health is a national competence. Okay, so health systems, healthcare, health is a competence that is not ruled at a European level. It is still one of the competence that stays in the member countries' sovereignty. So that adds a difficult layer in coordination, because every country is entitled by the treaties to decide on their health system. And there is coordination, but there is that. So that is why at the beginning, Europe why Europe hasn't done anything. Well, it's not in the domain. What we do is of course try to coordinate policies. And you have seen that has come out from the European Commission several guidelines on how the countries should desescalate. Like we have seen 2 days ago, there were some guidelines on telling countries to try to preserve the open borders, as you mentioned. How do we do it? Because if one country closes, the other opens, the other closes, then how can you ensure the movement of people who move for work, to study? My son is here with me, but he has to go to Italy to go back to finalize the university exams because he was studying in Italy. So you have this need of movement of goods and people and services, which is the key, I think, one of the basic of our single market. How do you coordinate is not easy, but they have realized that some of the things countries cannot do alone. One example, PPE, personal protective equipment. all the countries have been, like mad, tried to procure this to buy this equipment. But we did two very big procurement at European level, because if you buy it at European level, you need more. So therefore, the conditions are better. So we did two big procurement of all this equipment, and then it was distributed to all the countries that have asked for it, of course. So under our procedures. So things like this, this is the way we are helping the countries. And it's important for us. We need to maintain borders open. I know now, there are different quarantine systems in one country to another, but what we have is our overall border outside. We have the same conditions for everyone who wants to come into the Schengen space. And countries quickly opening borders between each other. One key element is tourism. What do we do with tourism? It's a big element of recovery of many countries, even Malaysia. You need to at one point open the borders to allow tourism, and people are not going to go to a beach or to a hotel just to be quarantined. So you need to allow certain, if you have in the countries the same system of where the pandemic is, then to allow the tourism, and that's why that was the main at the heart of the guidelines that the European Commission came 2 days ago, is just how we can open those borders as soon as possible to allow at least the summer tourism started, and help many economies all over Europe in order to be able to recover a bit. The conditions will not be the same. We are all sitting separate to each other with not the same fora that we want in restaurants and hotels, but at least there is a sense of normality coming in. And for us, I had a friend who was telling me, I need to move from Belgium to France, and I cannot do it. The border is closed, and it was, something that these people who are younger people never have witnessed in their lives. So they were there saying, why is the border closed when I normally can go and live in the southern? I was going to move to the southern France. So this feeling of, I think we are going to little by little open all this, because and this is part of the new normal. We want to continue to have our open borders and our mobility, which is key for goods. At the beginning, as I said, some countries close, but then we realized you cannot close. What about food security? How do you allow the trucks, even the medical goods, to move from one part to the other? So those were the green lines that were open for goods, so that the single market was not closed. And then you have a problem of disruption of supplies again. So all, very serious issues with a lot of examples of things that were done at European level. But of course, you have to put 27 together. You have to coordinate what are national policies. And therefore, it's much more difficult.
Certainly a continuing challenge indeed. There's another question, which the person asking remains anonymous. I think brings quite of relevance to the general current political discussions in Europe, and perhaps have some updates during the time of COVID-19 now. So, question on political choices made by countries within the European Union has seen great divergence in the recent past. How can the European Union mission represent such divergent views when fundamental European Union consensus is absent? I think the question touched really much on the differences of views and diverse contestations and political opinions or fragments maybe within the European Union itself, and how would you see the situation moving forwards?
Of course, there's always different political choices. You have different governments. but that doesn't mean that our principles and values that we all cherish and also Europe are there. So there is, I would say, more fundamental consensus that you will think so. There is always an underlying consensus that you can defend. When we were all rushing to work on research and of the vaccine, it was EU funds who were put together to help research on this vaccine. It was us who all together went and tried to work with the international community via WHO and with many countries to put a vaccine and treatment money for all. Then when we were looking for protective equipment, they all came to Europe to try to help, first to procure them and then to try to help with countries and reach out to partners to try to maintain the supply chains open. When it was about European citizens, there was an enormous, we have helped bring home more than 600,000 European citizens. And that has been a task force that was decided by the EU countries and given it to the European Foreign Minister, the High Representative, Mr. Borrell, which is my boss. So it was given the task, help the countries, the European countries, to bring the European citizens back home. And that's what we have been doing here. So our work is sometimes when you don't have that when you have that divergency, your work is to complement, to coordinate, and to try to bring the different dimensions together, and that is part of what we do. So there is a lot of need. We have been working hand by hand with the EU embassies here in Malaysia. Our mission has been fully occupied working with them together, even if they are political different choices at home. Here we have been working together because for us, two priorities: first, to bring our citizens back home, help them to bring them. There was still a group in Taiwan still there that came today out, but also working to try to maintain those supply chains, to be able to send also those medical goods that were needed in Europe. So those are two examples, but also working here with our business, and our business are European business that are hiring Malaysians. They are giving jobs to Malaysians and then working together, pulling all the information, the resources of European business, helping them to stay open under the conditions of the MCO and CMCO, but trying to help them because this is also about Malaysian companies, this is about Malaysian jobs, and they are part of the Malaysian society. Another example that I can mention, we have many Europeans that for them Malaysia is their home. Is a home. They don't have another house anywhere in Europe, and they are here under different schemes, being the Malaysia second home or the long-term visas, and they would not be able to come, and they have been, banned to come until today. I heard a statement from YB Nancy, who says that they will be allowed to come back. At least the ones of Malaysian second home. But this is important. There were so many families that were separated, mothers and children here, father there, or vice versa. And this also hampered on the business because they were just outside doing the business and had to come back home and they couldn't. So if Malaysia has to be the home for all, we need to maintain those real, bring them as real part of the Malaysian society and not separate them and let them out. So there's been a lot of work for us in cooperation and in complementary, in coordination with EU countries. That's what we do. We complement each other. We work for each other.
Mm-hmm. I think I will just put in one perhaps final question before we end our discussion today, and maybe later if Your Excellency would like to wrap up with some final points. It's also related to the situation of new normals within, I would say, international diplomacy is an example. And I'm sure that it is a field that you are very much familiar with. I have like a general understanding of international diplomacy would also at times usually require a lot of important discussions between different embassy office, different government to different governments, and a lot of these matters or topics being discussed requires a lot of confidentiality, requires a lot of security to informations. In some way, it could also be sensitive in some way. That require a lot of face-to-face meetings, specific gatherings between few leaders, in which under this current new normal, in where we are having a lot of meetings and discussion through online measures, while at the same time the issues on threats about online security has ever been increasing from time to time. How much is this new normal when it comes to diplomacy is also affecting relations between different government or different nations, especially knowing that some forms of communication as under the new digitalized and new technology is also quite a challenge, either when it comes to information leakages, which happens quite all the time now.
Well, information security of information, as you mentioned, Esan, is very important.
Yeah.
Very important. And there's always challenges, but you have seen that there are video conference or Zoom or WebEx meetings between all the EU leaders at the level of the Council of Leaders, European Council. Then you have it at the level of ministers. So they all meet like we are doing now.
Yeah.
All the security precautions possible, but some things are said and some things not. But yeah, there's also the phone. There's security phones as well who work, and yes. But we all have to be very alert and take security of information very seriously. As I mentioned, disinformation is ramping up, and it's not good for anyone. No personally, no professionally. It just creates more tensions, even geopolitical tensions. And there's no need. We have enough now to fight the pandemic. There's no need for that. So the ones that use this information to create more chaos, we need to work together with the industries and business to try to tackle that. But yeah, we have to be careful.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Excellency Maria. It's been a wonderful time to have this discussion, discussing about the new normalities and the post-COVID-19 situation. Hopefully, things will get better as we have been seeing over the past several weeks in Malaysia, and hope things will get better in other countries and also in part of the nations in the European Union as well. As usual, after our talk, I would like to ask for our participant attendees for a round of applause to our speakers, even though it's more like a virtual applause as an appreciation for taking part in our discussion today. And before we end the session, I will just like to give a brief update or kind of an announcement about our next webinar session. This one is going to happen most likely after the Hari Raya break. We haven't finalized the exact date, but we'll keep on updates on the session in our website. So next one would be with Mr. Stefan Preisner on will COVID-19 affect the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal. Indeed, there is also another important topic that we are going to discuss about. And definitely before I end, I would like to wish our participants Selamat Hari Raya, which is going to be quite hopefully a break, which is going to be a very different Hari Raya celebration in Malaysia for everyone, definitely. And to you as well, Your Excellency Maria, thanks a lot, and I hope you'll have a nice break as well during the Hari Raya break. Will not be as busy as the past several weeks, hopefully. And thank you for all our participants and attendees for your time. And Okay, I've just got the note, sorry, just to get adding this up, on the discussion on sustainable development goal is going to happen on the 6th of June. So same time, same day on Saturday, but it's going to be on the 6th of June. Just an information that I just received. Okay, so I will end up here, and I wish everyone best, wish everyone well, stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you all again. Bye-bye.